All right, so continuing on for chapter one, challenges of choosing foods. So I often find with patients I work with, they know what they're supposed to eat, right? Most of us know what we're supposed to eat, but it's not a matter of knowledge of what you're supposed to eat in the context of whatever crazy diet you may be following today or what's the swing in terms of diets today. It's a matter of choosing those right foods, right? So part of those problems, and you could probably list this off, but what makes it challenging to choose certain foods? And there's so many different foods. If you were to go to the grocery store today, and I'm sure you do, there are so many options for you out there. So the abundance of foods actually makes it sometimes a little harder to choose healthy foods. We talk about whole foods being just what it says there in their most natural form. Fast foods, ultra processed foods, functional foods. One of the things that we do find from a health standpoint is that 80% of the population does not consume enough fruits or vegetables daily. And I know that seems kind of crazy to just think just that basic thing. But again, that's one of the things that is probably up there with like healthy eating. What should I do? Just start working on getting in, 5 servings a day, so if you can get 3 servings of fruit a day, at least 2 servings of vegetables. Two isn't even enough. To me, that's like low end. You should be getting 5 servings of vegetables a day too. Um, you've got a glossary of foods in your book, so you can kind of read through what exactly each of those mean and what the terms refer to. So I'm just going to skim through some of these. When you look at some of the grocery options, what we have available today, I think this one over here was back then, and it's fun if you are able to travel and you go to some of these different countries and you look at the produce that's out there. One, there's so much more of it. Two, it doesn't look as pretty as our produce, so kind of makes you think, what are we putting in our produce? And then our ultra processed foods. The 5 characteristics of a healthy diet, just adequacy, balance, calorie control, moderation, variety. So people will ask me all the time, what should I do? And so if you really think about it, making sure you're getting enough nutrients, you're balancing out everything. You're not overeating. If you're overeating in calories, regardless of what those calories are, they're all going to count up in the end. Some moderation in certain things. You can have some added sugar. You can have alcohol in moderation if that's something you choose to do. If you choose not to, that's fine too. And then varying the types of foods. So be familiar with the technical terms on there. I'm sure you might see that on a test. Um, I think this is interesting. So when we think about why people choose foods, this concept of eating as an intentional act, it is and it isn't, right? I mean, that's mindful eating. So people do have to decide what they're going to eat, and they decide maybe at the moment they're eating, but probably at the moment they purchase the foods that they're going to have. There's so many social and cultural reasons that people eat or the foods that they eat, and so that's something we're going to be exploring a little bit more too. Um, Vegetarian, vegan, somebody who eats a little meat, a little bit of plants, omnivores, it's all in there. So again, just some other things in here, and I'm going to let you read this through the book, but just some of the reasons why people will tell me that they don't have time to eat. Not enough money, not enough time. I'm taking my vitamins so I can eat whatever I want to eat. So these are some of the things that people might have excuses for it. Factors that drive food choices. Taste is pretty important. If you don't like what something tastes like, you're probably not going to eat it. And if you like what something tastes like, you're probably going to eat more of it. So we do know there's some research on this sugar, fat, and salt that create this optimum amount of those nutrients to make you want to eat more and more of them. Price is a problem. For some people, inexpensive, less than healthy food is more affordable. Convenience is a thing. Advertising is huge, and so on. The list can kind of go on. So jumping, and again, this is just sort of a hodgepodge of stuff here, this chapter one. So when we think of nutrition science has been around for probably 130 years. So it's relatively new. It was in the late 1800s where we identified that there are actually nutrients in our food and that they actually did something in our body. But when we come up with the recommendations for nutrition, it does go through that same scientific approach, the systematic approach that you have for all sciences. It's challenging from a standpoint of it's hard to really pinpoint specific nutrition practices because as soon as you change one thing, so for instance, if we're saying eat a high fat diet, well, by default, you're probably eating less sugar because you're cutting sugar out because your focus is on fat. Well, was it the higher fat that's made you healthy, or is it the fact that you just don't have processed sugary foods in your diet? So the science of nutrition is tricky from a standpoint of changing one thing also changes other things in your diet. So, but still, the scientific approach, the scientific challenge is there with it. Um, and I'm just going to refer you over to take a peek at this in your book, talking about the scientific process. It explains it pretty well in there. Different types of studies. So as you're reading research on nutrition and you really want to find out, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? You want to look at the types of studies. Some studies will have better validity than others. And you might want to look at who's being studied. What is the population group that's being studied? But again, just kind of breaking down the different types of studies, and I'm going to refer you to read that in the book versus kind of going through here. So I'm going to skim over some of these things here. Again, I'm just skimming. Can I trust the media for nutrition? What's your first reaction? No, probably for the most part, not. You know, I just don't trust the media for anything anymore. There's good media, there's bad media. You know, when we look at nutrition, it's not as exciting as it would seem in terms of like the latest study of chocolate's going to cause weight loss. And I think that's one of the studies I have you guys look at this in this section this week. You really want to look at that research, and you want to look at what other research has been done around it, and think of it in the context of, does this even make sense? So, you know, doing a good research search, and not just Google. You can go to Google Scholar and get some better information. A little information in this first chapter talks about these National Health and Nutrition Examination Surveys, the NHANES surveys. And this kind of guided where we were looking at, you know, what are people eating? What are their weights? It did a lot of we had a lot of information there in terms of developing like the growth charts for children. And so these were very well done studies. They're ongoing. We're continuing to look at the health of the nation as a whole. Some of the nutrition research and policy agencies. So if you're really looking at where can I get good information, the FDA, the USDA, the CDC has good information in terms of research. So you get all this research, you get all this good information, you know what's driving your factors, and you'd like to eat healthier. How do you go about doing that? And so one of the models that we use, and I work in the telehealth arena at this point, doing nutrition education and diabetes education. And so there are a variety of different ways to go about how do we help people change behaviors. One of the ones that the company I work for, and one of the things that I actually as a practitioner feel is helpful, is using motivational interviewing. And part of that comes from this we're looking at the process of change. So the 6 stages of behavior change that was, I think, coined by Prochaska. And once you figure out where you're at in this behavior change, setting some realistic goals. So we talk about SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time sensitive. So setting up some SMART goals, and what are you going to do? When are you going to do it? Be specific about it. So the stages of change, again, you can refer to this in your book, but pre-contemplation, that's probably the worst time. If you're like getting all excited about this nutrition information you're getting, and you would like to encourage somebody to use this information and they're not ready for it, you actually can do them more harm. So pre-contemplation, not going to do it, have no desire to do it, not going there. You know, some of you may be there with nutrition. I'm taking this class because I have to. I'm checking off my units, but I'm not making any changes. Contemplation, thinking about it. Preparation, making some steps. Action, actually doing something. So I'm going to eat more fruits and vegetables. I went to the grocery store, I bought some more produce that's going to fit in my diet. I got my watermelon all cut up, and I started actually eating it for breakfast. You know, that would be that. Maintenance, continuing. Maintenance is tough, right? So I'll see patients who doing really well. They've made all these changes. They're losing weight. They're improving their blood sugars. And then a month later, it's like, what happened? They've had somewhat of that slip back down. So how do we help people maintain the behaviors that they're making? Sort of jumping topics again here. So nutrient density, as you look at nutrient density, really what this term is referring to is how are you getting a food that has a lot of nutrients without a lot of calories? And so the most nutrient dense foods out there being vegetables, fruit or have a high nutrient density, so a lot of vitamins and minerals without a lot of calories. Very poor nutrient dense foods would be things like chocolate bar, or soda that has no nutritional value whatsoever and has a lot of calories. Nuts actually are not very nutrient dense because they have a lot of calories from fat, but they don't have a lot of vitamins and minerals. So for the most part, this nutrient density term works out well in terms of defining which foods are better, but there are some caveats to it. Judging which foods are the most nutrient dense. And again, here you can see both of these breakfasts have about the same amount of calorie or energy. But when you look at the nutrients provided here by this breakfast, you're seeing a lot more vitamin in the breakfast on the left here. A lot more vitamin C, vitamin A, iron, whereas your typical donut and coffee is giving you basically nothing but calories. So there's no nutrients in that. So just to give you an example of what that is. And I do have a video talking about looking at going through the nutrition information, looking at people who are promoting different nutrition supplements. So I have that included in this week's modules, and it is in the back of chapter 1. So at the back of each chapter, there's a controversy. So be sure to take a look at that. I'm not going to talk too much more about it because I think I've got some good videos that really cover that topic. And that's pretty much the overview in a nutshell of chapter 1. Be sure to read it. This is just sort of to give you a little bit of verbiage and background on it. And there you go. That's chapter 1.